Greetings! It's I, Titus Magical, your Lord Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome to those of you joining me live on Twitch. Hello. Those of you joining me on YouTube, after this is recorded and uploaded later, also hello and welcome. Both of you, I enjoy you much. It's just one of you is joining me live, so I'm going to greet you a hello first. Come on, thank you very much. You know, gotta be nice to the people that are here with me, but those of you who are not with me at the time, you know, we still love you here at the channel. But anyway, enough digressions into insanity. It is Spooktober, the spooky month, and I'm doing a lot of tabletop topics which are spooky. And today, if the motorcycles don't drive by, doing it live. We're going to talk about something that's an interesting topic because it exists in two role-playing game systems that were originally connected and published together, and now have kind of gone their separate ways, but evidence still says they're connected. And that's the interesting thing about the evidence. We're going to talk about horrors, as where they come from Earthdawn, and where they come about Shadowrun. Now, if you have any experience with horrors, especially if you've played Earthdawn in the past, that's my question for today. Let me know in either live on Twitch chat if you're joining me live, or in the comments below if you're joining me on YouTube. Anyway, any experience you have with them, either in this or perhaps in Shadow. So, why don't I get this out of the way first? I did do some videos on Earthdawn ages ago in the early days of my channel, which I did hit on horrors for, I think at the time it might have been 3rd edition Earthdawn. I'm not 100% sure. I have to remember which one I did, 3rd or 4th edition. 4th edition, I believe, is the one that's out now, though. So we have had a new release in Earthdawn. I can quickly look that up and know these things and be able to state these information properly as I take a drink of iced tea. Okay, 4th edition was out, so I might have been talking about 4th edition at the time. I don't remember. I might have only had 3rd edition books, though, because 3rd edition came out in 2009, 4th edition came out in 2015. So there is the 4th edition, and 4th edition is still technically supported. I don't talk about it a lot because there's not a lot of updates ever. For a while back, a couple years ago, I dove deeper into seeing when the updates were. Nowadays, it's an interesting system. We're not getting into mechanics here. We're talking about something that is a major part of the storyline of Earthdawn, and then how it pertains to Shadowrun. So, I've talked about this before in videos. Let's start with let's start with our basics of some books that you might want to check out if you're going to do further research beyond what I've done now. So that's probably a good place to start. So the original Earthdawn book is probably a really good place to check out. You can also check out Earthdawn, the 4th edition Player's Guide. That's a good place to get some information on horrors. There's the Earthdawn Horrors book. Hey. And then when it comes to Shadowrun, there's 2 books that deal with horrors, sort of. It's the problem that there isn't a actual source book on horrors for Shadowrun. Because they're not technically a thing. When I talk about insect spirits, I talked a little bit earlier this month. I talked a little bit how they're connected in a way to horrors. I think I did. I should have done that. But anyway, Shadowrun: The Clutch of the Dragons, which is a source book you can check out, and the novel Worlds Without End deals with someone possessed by a horror. That's the thing that we can talk about there. So there are some sources of information, and this is an older book, though. This is an older novel. But the other book here, this one is from the 4th edition book, so we're already in the Catalyst Game Studios time period, when Catalyst owns Shadowrun, and we're still dealing with stuff that's connected with horrors. So horrors haven't gone away from the Shadowrun storyline. And though they're tentatively connected still, the fact that we have parts of this storyline and it exists within the ideas of Shadowrun still, means there still are connections. Why don't we start, though, with the basics of what horrors are in Earthdawn, and then we'll talk about what horrors are in Shadowrun and how they're maybe connected. So, I think it's a little more thing for this one. Yeah, this is a horror. As you can see, it's a weird monstrous amalgam of creature. It looks like it sort of has flesh up top. It goes to just bones down below. It is an unusual creature, to say the least. There isn't a specific being that can be called a Har. They are a diverse range of creatures. They're all interplanar creatures. And they perpetrated the Scourge during the Earthdawn time period. I've talked about it before, but Shadowrun is the 6th world. Earthdawn is the 4th world. It's at basically it's the tail end of the 4th world, getting into the 5th world. And Shadowrun is the 6th world. Basically, in the Shadowrun metaverse, magic comes in cycles. Magic appears, magic disappears. Magic appears, magic disappears. The 4th world was when magic appeared. And this taking place when magic is starting to disappear, on the tail end of it. At the height of it was the Scourge. It's when Hars, basically... It was a 400-year period where Hars were able to cross into the realm with no repercussions. They could just enter into our world, wreak havoc on the land, inhabitants corrupting the fabric of space and time and stuff. And basically, the Scourge ended when magic levels were starting to die down again. They're forced back into their world. Basically, in the Earthdawn storyline, the Dwarven Empire of the Theron Empire, which was a Dwarven Empire, managed to save everybody in civilization with cares. Underground cities in the living earth that were purposely designed to survive the Scourge. Some were penetrated by horrors, some were not. Some were protected by dragons. There may have been other ways to survive during the Scourge. There were conformed with isolated communities surviving it. Basically, horrors fed on living matter and emotions, destroyed a lot of the ecosphere. It was a lot of damaging things. Scourge is very bad. It was like an apocalyptic thing where these creatures from beyond the planes came into existence. Magic disappears. We hit the 5th world. Magic reappears. We get to the 6th world. We are at the cusp of magic appearing. Theoretically, magic will get to that point in time, at the top of that ebb, and horrors will return. This is where characters like the immortal elf Harlequin is trying to prepare meta-humanity in such a way that they have not only magical technology for this time through, but also like science technology to combine the two to fight horrors. So this is the metaversal, like the storyline kind of in storylines of Shadowrun in a way into Earthdawn. Anyway, so there's your thing. I've talked about it probably before, but it's important to kind of go over it again for this video. Horrors are considered by name givers, basically the people of Earthdawn. Most of those that named themselves the dwarves, elves, humans, obsidian, orcs, srang, trolls, wildlings, and dragons. Dragons, though, are sometimes called name takers. That's an entirely other thing. We're not talking about that. We're not diving into Earthdawn too much today. But horrors are only capable of malice and destruction. They personify corruption. They're name eaters, they're referred to as, sometimes. So they originate from an astral realm. Something akin to like a hell. Sorry. And with the various ages in Earthdawn, you know, at the flow, horrors come in, they do their thing, they go away. There isn't like a good classification physically for horrors, but they display certain kind of characteristics and powers. They manifest in an infinite variety of forms. They can be ravenous monstrosities, devouring all, intellectual malign entities that feed off negative emotions from victims. The common traits of horrors is they have an instinct or desire to cause harm. It's basically thought that horrors exist and subsist on negative emotions produced in victims they harm. So, powers of horrors in Earthdawn. There's a variety of them, but they call us misery, pain, suffering. Some most notable ones are a curse of pattern with astral tape, which through which they can wield their other powers. Oh boy! Just to kind of simplify things, what that means is corrupt a magic-using character in Earthdawn and use their powers through that being. That's an easy way to say it. There's a lot about the magic of Earthdawn I dove into years ago, which I've got to admit, like, after these years, my brain has shut out a lot of it. It was very complex. Earthdawn magic is simple in use, much more simpler than, let's say, Mage the Ascension is. But in concept, it is the most complex and difficult thing you could ever talk about. Let me put it that way. So, concepts and understanding of what all that shit means is incredibly complex. If you like that part of it. But if you break that down and just get into character stuff, it's just like, I use magic. A lot of times. We're not getting into Earthdawn again. That might be a revisit one day to like try to figure out and make a better way of explaining Earthdawn. They can warp and construct astral energies and magic, inflict horrendous damage by causing victims' skin to tear and twist around their bodies, create undead from bodies of slain victims, drain the magic and life essence of living beings, instill crippling terror to those nearby, and manipulate a victim's thought and actions and defile their dreams and emotions. And not all horrors can do these. These are just very common ones. But again, this is also not an extensive list, because there's a billion different powers as there's an infinite number of horrors. Now, again, there is another thing, though, too, is though there is an infinite array of forms of horrors, there are certain groups that do share characteristics or have similar powers. There are things like the bloat forms, despair thoughts, and skullworms. Are three groups that are similar in power and characteristics, though they will still be unique and still have uniqueness to them, but they are kind of almost like a sub-classification. And again, a particular individual, even within these groups, may exhibit features and powers that are distinct to others of its species, if you can call it that at most. So it's this interesting idea of horrors can be similar. You could know about some of the more similar species, which will give you a general idea of what you're looking at when you encounter a horror, but then the problem still comes to, it's not the end-all, be-all at knowing what to do or what we're dealing with. It still is a chance that it's something else completely, in a way. The worst things that happen are when horrors have names and therefore a true pattern. Oh! Pattern magic, understanding patterns, and the connections with that is a deep dive into Earthdawn magic. There's a concept behind Earthdawn magic that names have power. They are incredibly important, and knowing something's true name makes it easier to manipulate with magic. That's a summary of it. That's a very easy summary of it. So the idea of a true pattern would be something that has basically a true name. It's a very unique individual. It's, a humanoid with thoughts and stuff like that has a true pattern. There are things that don't have true patterns, that have patterns to them still. Like a tree is probably not going to have a true pattern, but it's going to have a pattern. If I'm summarizing it a little bit here. The idea of a motorcycles. It's late October. Please don't continue to complain about that. It's like recording something with the lawnmower in the background. So I got motorcycles. Who's way faster than you should on this road. A horror isn't something that should have a true pattern, because it's not something that's really native to our world to say. And having a true pattern is more connecting with our world. And that's another part of it entirely. So, a horror with a name and a true pattern is a monster among monsters. They are a dangerous existence. unique powers or variations of common horrors sometimes. They have names that they will call themselves, but they're, again, as I said, things have a true name and a name. Their true name may not be known. So, nemesis, hate, betrayer concepts have been described to them. Some, like Chanterelle's Horror, have been named for the individual that first encountered it. The most powerful believed to exist is Virgigmore, the hunter of the great dragons. Let me see if I can find a picture of Virgigmore. This is a hell of a name to try and pronounce. I can actually put this in Twitch chat here, so people that are living at home, that in YouTube can just see it. There you go, Virgigmore. That's a hell of a name. Do you have any images of Virgigmore? Sure! Why is that under Shadowrun Portland? That's not... Oh, that's the wrong one. That's the search. Whoops. That's not the... That's the image I wanted. Let me take the search back. Come on. Scuff! Everybody loves some stuff. What is this though? It's Obsidian Portal. Oh. Connected to Shadowrun Portal and Obsidian Portal. Which they talk about it there. Anyway, there's Virgigmore. Image of it to grieve. There's also apparently like a Facet Game Store token of this thing. It is a thing. So it actually has a token about it. That's also really cool. The token was a thing for me. But again, something like Virgigmore here, which you would have to look up its own books and stuff and dive deep into that, it's a named horror. It has a true pattern. Virgigmore is what people would refer to it as. It's not the name which invokes true power over it, a true name. That is unknown and cannot be known because it is so alien and so monstrous, and, these things destroyed the world, drove civilization to its brink. The beings, the name givers, survived hiding underground, and barely did. Again, not everywhere they tried to hide managed to survive the Scourge. These places were built to fight the Scourge, but just sometimes it didn't work. And so you have that loss of life. And the thing about Earthdawn is, yes, you're past the Scourge. Most of the horrors have gone away. But there's still places that are very magical. And all the magic hasn't gone away. All the horrors haven't gone away. There's still some lurking out there, holding on to power, feeding, trying to stay alive, figuring out ways to survive the coming drought of magic. And oftentimes it involves victims and death. So, that's horrors. They are not the only, but they are a primary antagonist you will face in Earthdawn. They will be monsters. They will always be a threat. And they will never be kind. The cruelty they will inflict will be massive. Horrors are to be feared more than people. They certainly manipulate them, and they certainly create a lot of things. And oftentimes, named or not, they will be a boss. Until you get to really high-ranking Earthdawn, in which then, honestly, when you're fighting named things like Virgigmore here, he probably has lesser horrors working for him. If you get into a conflict with something like that. Earthdawn has a level system. That's not something we're talking about today. Anyway, that's the Earthdawn side of things. So now you have an idea of what horrors are in a sense of what kind of creatures they are, what kind of world they come from, where they are mainly described. Let's move into Shadowrun. Because when we move into Shadowrun, horrors aren't completely unexistent. And I think that's an important part of the aspect here. We have our good friend right here, who is Yalsif, I believe it is. I'd have to look at the exact. Usurth Grath. So your Grath was from the Worlds Without End novel. It was a horror with a deep connection to the immortal elf Aina. It fed off the pain of marked victims. It was so twisted in a way that it would protect its victims from others to maintain the relationship of it feeding off the pain of its own victims. So it's sort of like, I'm feeding off of your pain, but I want you to die. So I keep feeding off that pain and causing you suffer. But that's connection to an immortal elf, Aina Dupree, which we do know exists in 2080. Yes, is in the World Without End novel, but in 2080 was picked to be successful to lead the Unseelie Court. So I would have to figure out which of it. It's either like Clutch of the Dragons or Year of the Comet. She was in the Dawn of Artifact series. She was in Clutch of Dragons. So she shows up in a lot of places. In a lot of books. So it's sort of like the Artifacts Unbound from 4th edition. Deals with her. So she's in 4th edition. That's an important thing, and goes into 2080s that we have information on Aina, who is an immortal elf. Immortal elves are supposed to have come from the immortals, and many of them remember, just like some of the great dragons, Earthdawn's world. There's also Thesis, who's a half-immortal elf, half-horror, who was responsible for the first attempt of a great ghost dance at Wounded Knee in 1890, who has the upper body of a human, lower body of a snake. Because Aina and Ysurthgath apparently had a child. So, Thesis was in Cambodia in 2064, mentioned in 2074, joined the Draco Foundation. So it's sort of like, these are major characters that connect up with horrors that we have in the 6th world. So currently, though, in Shadowrun, horrors can't show up. There's not enough magic. Mana levels have to be high enough. They were in the Earthdawn universe, but it's assumed that they come from some kind of deep metaplanes that have yet to be discovered. Well, deep metaplanes themselves have been discovered, but where in the deep metaplanes that horrors will come from, or diving deep enough, hasn't been done yet. But it's assumed that these deep areas of the astral space and getting into metaplanes is where we start discovering where horrors are. And certainly there have been precursors to horrors. We have things that are supposed to be manifestations of horror's arrival. Wraiths, nomad spirits, Shadowrun, insect spirits, maybe. Insect spirits are less a herald for horrors and more herald that the dark places where horrors are getting closer, basically. So insect spirits are kind of like, they aren't actually directly related to horrors, unlike some of the others, the Shadowrun, nomad spirits, wraiths, but have a basic connections. And just to go over little basics of those creatures, wraiths are spirits of an unidentifiable origin, kind kind of Grim Reaper-like creatures that manifest. They're very unique and interesting. Nomad is a mental parasite. It possesses a victim, turns them homicidal, feeds off their essence. And Shadium are body-snatching spirit, so they are a little like insect spirits in a way, but they aren't actually insect spirits. They're their own thing, so yeah. Anyway, so beyond this, Shadowrun hasn't actually seen horrors, so we can't really classify it the same way, other than, you know, classifying things in the way that they were in Earthdawn. You know, that's information that kind of can be shown. Though again, there were very powerful, near divine-like beings in Earthdawn's world, the Passions, and some of them fell to horrors. So they killed and drove insane several godlike entities. That's how not only powerful the Scourge was, but how many horrors were out there. Just keep that in mind, too. And the powers are thought to be relatively the same. It just comes down to, in Shadowrun, we don't know how horrors have evolved. Probably not very much, but how mechanically they would work the same way is very big questions. And certainly things like Anina and her connections with Usarkath and their son, Thesis. So, you know, she had a son with a horror that kind of possessed her and did horrible things to her. So that was a thing that happened. But again, there's a lot about Ina's story that's probably, you'd want to dive into all the various books and places that she's talked about and get into the horrors of the story about that. And same with Thasus. You probably want to dive into it. Where's an image of Thasus? If I can spell it right. They don't. I can show off Harlequin. I've got an image of this dude. Why not? Let's get a good image of Harlequin. And show it off to you guys. It's fun, you know? There he is. That's not really close. That's very small. There you go. It's an image. It's not a great one. But if we were looking up Immortal Elves, this is Harlequin. It's one of them. Is it a better picture? No, it's not. I just can't find a great picture of this man. So it's sort of like, he is important too in this entire story of horrors, because his entire thing is he doesn't want them prematurely entering the Sixth World. He is hoping that, the thing is, he believes that in 2,500 years, humanity will develop both in magic and technology to defend against them. So he's preventing them from entering before 2,500 years have passed. He's immortal. He's got long-term plans. He basically wants people to be able to fight against horrors and not have to worry about it. It's an interesting concept. But, yeah. We do know he was born in the Fourth World. And yeah. So, I think that's... you know... For a man that's existed for a long time, it seems oddly specific, but you're mortal, you hate horrors, because I guess when you were born, they were destroying your world, you know. I can tell you where he lives on a chateau off the coast of France. He resides at Chateau d'If off the coast of France. The players wouldn't know that, but they mention in the information about it. Most immortal elves do tend to involve themselves with a lot of intrigue, and he doesn't. He's basically magical research, aka let's take care of the threat of horrors. So, yeah. Anyway, that's probably a good place to leave off chatting about horrors to a degree, because, as I said, the thing is, mechanically, we can dive into horrors, their types and stuff from Earthdawn. But, my old video, it might not be as good as it could be nowadays. I mean, it's like 7 years old, but it still gives the information, I think, pretty well on what horrors were when I talked about them back then. And I would recommend just grabbing some old Earthdawn books if you're interested in where they were. It's not impossible to do horror-related stories in Shadowrun, but you have to assume that it's something like, it's an unusual thing. Things like the horrors that were left over from the fourth world survive the fifth world by doing things like the one that piggybacked on a immortal elf and fed on it for thousands of years, driving her kind of a little crazy until she finally got rid of it, but in the process bore some kind of horrible, maybe horrible, I don't know, half human, half immortal elf, half horror son, who, I mean, seems okay, but we don't know a lot about them. Gotta admit, like, it's sort of like, they don't talk bad about the person, but they also don't know a lot about them because they're just mentioned in a couple of places in books and adventures, But this is stuff that's 4th and 5th edition, that horrors are still mentioned. So yes, we don't really see the legacy of Earthdawn as much in 6th edition, but again, I don't know if there's many 6th edition books coming out right now. I'd have to look at them. What do you have for releases? Occasionally. They've been doing a lot of battle tech, but I've been doing some Shadowrun stuff here and there. So it's not like Shadowrun you couldn't find things for. It's just a little bit rarer nowadays. They have their brands. They put out some stuff. I can't say for sure we won't see stuff that would relate more to that. But again, think about it this way. When Harlequin's saying 2,500 years, he's hoping to prevent horrors from the new scourge from happening, because that's when he thinks, meta-humanity will develop magic and technology enough to fight them. That's a long ways away. And again, we got precursors. We've got things that are maybe like from similar environments. Like insect spirits are tiny things that can kind of come in from the recesses of their environment. So it's almost like, opening up a door to a swamp and the mosquitoes come in and it tells you there's a swamp outside, but you really know when the gator wanders in. It's sort of that way, You open the door, the gator wanders in, looking for that piece of meat you got on the table. And they're ready to come feed. They might attack you in the meantime, the big old gator. That's the horrors. But in that swamp they're from, maybe there's some mosquitoes and annoying pests and like that. They might just come buzzing in because you got the door open first. Gator can take some time to notice. And maybe if you don't have that meat out, it's not going to be wanting to there. It's as soon as you put that roast out, get that door open, gator might smell it coming. There's a weird analogy that I'm trying to use to describe horrors and insect spirits, and that they're sort of but not really related, but I hope you got the point. I really do like that I went in a very weird analogical way. Look, I have funny ideas sometimes. Anyway. But horrors as a story element aren't necessarily a bad thing to use. It's just, I think the ideas of them are very difficult to use because they are technically an incredible threat and have very unusual and destructive powers when it comes to physical beings. So there are things like wraiths, nomads, and other creatures like that, or spirits like that, that I would recommend maybe using first. But if you want to, it's not outside the realm of possibility to throw in a Harlequin adventure and have him in there as an NPC and some other crates, or some of the other characters connected to them. I still want to run Dawn of the Artifacts, or the Artifact series in Shadowrun, probably 5th edition instead of 4th edition, the original 4th edition series of books, adventures. But I would always want to run those, maybe on stream. And the idea is, it does connect up incidentally with Harlequin, because someone who knows Harlequin and learns a few things from him is part of the story. Keep that in mind. So there is someone that's connected in a way to Harlequin that's part of the story. You encounter in the first book. There's a lot of stuff that happens. It's the Artifact series. So you deal with ancient artifacts that are magical in nature. So of course, you've got people hired on, and you get hired on down the chain of hiring people on. Someone hires someone who hires someone who hires you. And then, that's how it works. That's a future me thing. Right now, I'm going to say, that's it for today. We talked about horrors. I hope you got enough. I like them as a concept, and honestly, there's always been part of me that thought about running Earthdawn, but I was definitely scared away when I did my videos on Earthdawn years ago, because I'm sorry, diving into the pattern stuff and pattern magic and all the way that those exist within Earthdawn, mechanically it's not difficult, but conceptually it's a lot. It's a lot conceptually. It's sort of like Shadowrun has problems with its magic, especially earlier editions. It's the same way. They've evolved it over the generations. It's still got that thing. I mean, honestly, it did get a little horrific. There's some dark things that horrors did. Horrors did, well, they lived up to their name. The Scourge was real bad. If you get into Earthdawn stories, anything that existed during the Scourge and remembers it, oof, nightmares. Shoutouts for things. If you're joining me live on Twitch, hi, thank you. Glad to have you here. Follow me, really nice. If you're joining me on YouTube later on, after this is put up online, hey, also thanks. A subscription on YouTube, ring the bell if you already subscribed, leave a like, comment. Hey, my question about horrors. Have you ever used them in either Earthdawn or Shadowrun? Have you done, encountered them in Earthdawn, either as a player or a GM? Or have you used something related to them in Shadowrun? I actually had a storyline that was vaguely related to horrors that I was doing in Shadowrun many years ago. We only got like 5 sessions in before we had to stop, unfortunately. But it was an interesting storyline I used that was... I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it did relate to something related to horrors, and it was more akin to our half-horror friends there. It was about like someone finding an ancient artifact and basically figuring out a way, because they had the DNA of something akin to a half-horror on it, and basically were trying to clone/engineer their own whatever this creature was, because it was very powerful, and recreated basically some pseudo half-horrors and had some issues with them. It was an interesting storyline. It was complex. I only had 5 sessions. I got nowhere in the story. But it is, if I ever talk about the adventure where I mention someone playing a troll disguised as a livery person in a corporate facility, goes up to one of the guards as they're dropping off stuff in their disguise and says, "I gotta take a dump," to let them in deeper into the facility to use the bathroom and then beat up some guards and let his friends in. That was that story. The line and the use of it was perfect. It was a great idea, and it's one of my favorites anybody's ever done in Shadowrun. It's basically like, who's going to say no to the giant troll that's like, can I use your bathroom? But like in a way that's just sort of threatening. It was wonderful. But that was a Shadowrun adventure, and that one that dealt with hearts. Other shoutouts, I have a Discord in twitter.com. If you want to see basically thoughts, patterns, scheduling, and occasional pictures of animals and stuff like that, or nature, I do those. Scheduling. You want to join me live every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoon, usually between 1 or 2. Give or take the schedule. A little late today. And around 11 o'clock on Saturdays. Those have to be a lot more exact, but I have to do those. World of Darkness stuff's usually Saturdays. Pathfinder/Galarian stuff on Thursdays, and Tuesdays, like today, is the Shadowrun stuff or other miscellaneous games. So if you want to check this stuff out live, those are the time periods. Otherwise, they'll go up on YouTube a day or two later. Other stuff I do that you might find is I do live shows. The current live show is on break until the 1st of November, where the Crimson Queen, new adventure path that I'm going to be running with people, a new adventure, will begin. It'll be a nice big one. We'll be replacing Buccaneer's Shackled Sea. It'll be a live show of some Pathfinder First Edition, which will be up on the channel. I'm discussing tabletop every Saturday. Again, both of these live on those respective days. Wednesday evenings for the Crimson Queen, and Saturday evenings around 6 for discussing tabletop. And those all go up on YouTube, so you can go check them out. I think that's all the shoutouts I have to give. I sometimes remember everything, sometimes don't. But hey, thank you for joining me, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of dive into hearts and Shadowrun and Earthdawn a little bit and how they are connected. I've talked about these before, but it's always good to kind of put them all in one place, all the information, kind of puzzle it together in a way that maybe you can digest it. But until the next time we chat about any of these, Shadowrun, Earthdawn, some other tabletop things, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.